And welcome to this edition of Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Hi, Keith. How are you today?
I'm good. And we've got a very special guest with us today, Ray. So why don't you introduce him?
Sure, I'll be glad to. We've got John Jefferson with us today. He's the Jefferson part of the Jefferson Bass writing group. He and Dr. Bill Bass have been writing several books. And I know there's a good story there, John, about how all that came to be. So we'll want to get into that, and we'll want to talk about your involvement in Oak Ridge when I got the opportunity to give you a tour of Y12. So tell us a little about yourself and how you come to be working with Dr. Bass, and then let's start talking about Bones of Betrayal first, okay?
Sure thing. I'm happy to be here. It's been fun just to kind of go back down memory lane, look back at the book a little bit to try to refresh my memory, because there's been a lot of years and a lot of water and probably a lot of brain cells under the bridge since I wrote it about 15 years ago. But it's been a real delight for me to spend 20 years now collaborating with the world-renowned anthropologist Dr. Bill Bass, creator of the Body Farm. The story behind that collaboration is kind of fun. I was a documentary maker back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was making shows for the History Channel and the Arts and Entertainment Network. The A&E shows were what we jokingly called travel porn, because we would go to some exotic location like Monaco or Paris, and we would stay in fancy hotels. I'm sorry, I got a light going in and out. We'd stay in fancy hotels and tell stories about the rich and famous people who visited those hotels back in the Gilded Age of the late 1800s and early 1900s. But at some point I got a little bored with making the travel porn shows. How many times can you write about an ornate crystal chandelier or a gilded coffered ceiling, And I thought, well, what documentary would I like to make? What would be interesting to me to make? And I've always loved science. I had been a pre-med major in college until I ran afoul of an advanced chemistry course and realized I really didn't understand what it was about. And so I probably had no business being a doctor. But I'd always loved science, and I spent quite a few years, about 10 years at Oak Ridge National Laboratory as a science writer. Started out as a technical editor, correcting the grammar and reports that were written about things I had no understanding of, but moved on to trying to understand and trying to explain the research that was going on at the lab in terms that the people like me and the public could understand, so they would understand what the benefits of that research were and what their tax dollars were at work doing. But as part of that work, I helped make a couple of videos for Oak Ridge National Lab for a couple of visitor centers. One sort of overlooking the main laboratory complex, and one at the historic graphite reactor, the first controlled isotope producing reactor in the world. So I wrote the scripts, I interviewed the scientists who were in the videos, and I thought, well, this is a lot of fun. And then we had hired an outside production company to actually shoot those videos and edit them. And at some point, one of the partners in that company said, hey, you're kind of good at this. If you ever want to do any more of this, let us know. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. So that's how I got into the travel porn business and started making TV shows. And so, as I'm thinking about what would I be more interested in than these travel shows, I thought, well, science and Oak Ridge, and and I'm right here. And so I tried pitching a couple of shows about Oak Ridge and the science, and I didn't get any nibbles on those. And then I thought, well, there's the body farm at the University of Tennessee. So I'll call them up and see what happens. So
So there,
Well,
there you did, and I think that's probably when I first met you. Is right after you had made that documentary.
so I called up Bill Bass out of the blue. He didn't know me from Adam. But I told him who I was, and that I would be really interested in making a documentary about the research at the body farm. I had seen a couple of shows that had been done about the body farm, but they really focused pretty much entirely on the body farm scientists and their work in helping solve crimes. And I thought there hadn't been enough done yet about the research itself. So I explained that, and Bill was enthusiastic, and he arranged a lunch meeting. Of course, you got to talk about bodies over lunch, right?
yeah.
We had a lunch meeting to talk about human decomposition and decay with other faculty, and I ended up making 2 one-hour documentaries for the National Geographic Channel about the body farm, and they got shown all over the world. They kept showing them every time the network would show the shows. The University of Tennessee would get a bunch of calls from people saying they wanted to donate their bodies. So, I know a lot of people watched it. A lot of people found it really powerful. One of the scientists said, your show just aired again. I know, because I got a bunch of calls today from people wanting to donate their bodies. So that's how. So Bill and I really liked working together on the films, and then at some point along the way, I had written an article about the body farm for a magazine, and he read the article and said, he seemed surprised. He said, "Well, you're a pretty good writer. Why don't you help me write a memoir? Because I do scientific writing, but I don't do popular level writing. What do you think?" I said, "What? Sure, that sounds interesting." So I thought this would be a one-time project. I'm going to help this guy try to write a memoir. And that was 20 years and 12 books ago. So it's turned into, this water, that one request from him has turned into this watershed event in my life and career.
So you helped him write the memoir, and then you decided that you were going to write fiction books, kind of based on the same principle of the body farm, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I interviewed him for the memoir. I interviewed him for hours and hours. We would get together every Tuesday morning from 9 to noon. I recorded him, and I went out and heard him do public talks, and I saw how people loved him, and loved both the work he was doing, but also just loved his personality. He was up to his elbows in death and dismemberment, but he's really charming and funny and lively. And I thought, he would be a great character, a great hero for crime fiction. We don't need a dark, tortured soul. We need somebody who's got a sense of humor. So I said, what would you think about trying to spin a character like you into fiction? He said, "Well, who would want to read that?" I said, "Well, I think probably quite a few people." He said, "Well, give it a try." So, we, got together a proposal and sent it to an agent, and HarperCollins snapped it right up. Turns out that the editor at HarperCollins had gone to school, grown up and gone to school in Chattanooga. And in high school, she had gone to what's called governor's school for smart high school students in Tennessee. And guess who one of her guest lecturers at 3 turned into 5, and 5 turned into 10. So it's all, it's one of those, just everything conspired together. It's like the universe or the planets aligned to let us have this good time writing these books.
Well, I know the first ones you wrote about was actually about the body farm. And how did you come to bring up the one Bones of Betrayal. It was one of the early ones, but not the first.
Right.
So
I
how did
think
you
I
get to
think
the one
Bones
about
of
Oak Ridge?
yeah, the Oak Ridge book, which was our shorthand for it. The Oak Ridge book, I think, is book number 5 out of the 10. And just I mean, it's interesting writing a series. It's really great. It lets you develop characters over time, but it also can be kind of scary because there's the pressure. Oh, what is the next book? And what is the next book? And what is the next book? So, but after having featured the Body Farm itself pretty prominently in the first 4 novels, I thought, it'd be fun to include something that I really have a personal love for, and that's Oak Ridge. Because I had lived in Oak Ridge for about 12 years, and I worked in Oak Ridge for some years beyond that. I'd always found Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to be this fascinating place. So I thought, a book in which Oak Ridge is a character, like a real the setting is a main character, with that rich past that Oak Ridge has. I thought that would be kind of fun, and golly, it was.
Well, that's obviously where I met you and got to know about the books, and actually went back and bought all you had written up to that point. But it was fun.
Thank you.
Giving you a tour of Y12. If I remember, the way you approached it was to tell me that the setting was going to be in Oak Ridge.
Mhm.
There was going to be a murder, obviously, and that you also wanted to find a location where a body could be found that had been murdered during the Manhattan Project. So you were going to go back in history to that part of time. So we
Right.
took a tour, you and Dr. Bass and me, and one of the locations that I took you to was over on the south side of Chestnut Ridge to the Walker Branch watershed. And we found what was at that time a blue metal building, but it had a silo right there by it. And it turns out that that's what we call Katie's Kitchen now, because one of the in the later years, a department secretary used to like to come out there in the woods and have her lunch at the department of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory that was using that facility. And that name just caught on, Katie's Kitchen. We literally wrote a cookbook out at Y12 about various recipes. And we brought Miss Katie Odom back and had her sign that book as we raised money for the United Way. But anyway, I'm straying off the main point. Main point was you liked that silo a lot, and you liked that location that we had gone to in the woods. And if I remember correctly, you also included someone in the book as a character in the book that was able to detect the gases of decaying flesh underground. And I'm trying to think of his name now. You remember?
Yeah, his name is Arpad Vass.
Yes, Vass. That's right. Yeah,
with a V, not a B.
Yeah. Right.
It's confusingly similar, if you're hearing it. But
Right.
Arpad did a PhD in anthropology, with Bill Bass as his primary dissertation advisor. Arpad has got a lot of background in kind of forensic chemistry. And excuse me. So Arpad, his dissertation, I believe, was looking at analyzing the soil taken from underneath decaying bodies to see what he could detect, and whether soil samples could be used as evidence in criminal cases to show that yes, a body was here. And then he over the years, he's done a lot of work to build on that initial premise and look at ways to basically read the change in the chemicals under a body or around a body or within organs in the body itself, ways to read those kind of like a stopwatch time clock showing how at different points in decay, the ratio of chemicals is different. So if you find this particular ratio, you're looking at a body that's, that's been dead for X number of days or weeks or even months. I mean, it's fascinating work to create that kind of chemical, to detect the chemical fingerprints and use those to identify the time, not the person. So Arpad had been working at the time I was writing the book on what he called the sniffer, which is this field device that that could possibly take the place of a cadaver sniffing dog. So I thought it'd be fun to include Arpad. There's a lot of bits of real life people in that book, including me. You may remember there's a sort of Bush League documentary maker in the film who ends up nosing around and ends up dead. So I appear and am swiftly killed off myself in this book.
Well, I'll have to admit that when I tell people about this story of giving you all the tours and being involved in the writing of the book, the way I end that story is say, you all need to buy this book on Amazon because it's got royalties associated with it.
Thank you.
And then I say, you really know the real truth is the only pay I got for that is I'm a character in the book and I got my name on 2 pages.
Well, I don't get much more pay than that, Ray. I don't get much more, I'll tell you.
I was the photographer that you wrote in, so I appreciate it.
But back to Katie's kitchen, that silo out in the woods by a little creek. What I loved about that, partly it was just, this old weathered concrete silo with a rusty tin roof out in the woods in this incongruous place. Obviously, it's not in a pasture. But then, learning about it, learning that they stored highly enriched uranium or other isotopes there, and that the silo was actually a guard tower. There were guys up in the top of that silo with guns, keeping guard over that precious commodity. That was really interesting. Now, I will admit, I think the statute of limitations for trespassing is long over. I took a lot of lovely runs on those gravel patrol roads up in the woods around Oak Ridge National Laboratory, including running up that Walker Branch watershed road many a time. Sometimes at lunchtime. I took lunch times that were way too long. And sometimes at the end of the day, and I was up there, sometimes late in the day as the sun was going down, and I'm surprised I didn't get arrested or shot. But I loved that place. That was fascinating.
Yeah. There are many amenities about living in Oak Ridge. So some of it is that fact that now there's still some 30-something thousand acres of forested land that only a few people have ready access to. You working at the laboratory gave you access to some of the areas that routinely we wouldn't get. But there are some 85 miles of greenway hiking trails in Oak Ridge. Actually, if you count all of the trails, you're going to find over 100 miles of trails. Some of them paved, a lot of them are in the woods, and here we are in the middle of fall, and it makes me want to just leave and go get into the woods and enjoy the trees. And in fact, I may do that when we get through here.
We'll enjoy them for me. Those old gravel patrol roads were, winding through the, along the ridges and through the valleys were just gorgeous.
So back to Bones of Betrayal. You went ahead and finished the book and published it, but we had the book launch out at the New Hope Center at Y12. Tell us what you remember about that evening. I really enjoyed that.
So I remember a couple things. I remember we had a good crowd, and I remember you were a really gracious host, and it was fun to be in that center, which does help preserve and showcase the rich history of that place, ranging from the World War II history on up. And I think that's really important. I had I had loved the really old museum that there used to be. I think that's gone now, right?
Yeah,
In
they've
the
changed.
former school.
Actually, let's talk just a minute about that, and we'll come back to that book launch. But
Okay.
the museum situation in Oak Ridge today is one that, of course, COVID has had an impact for the past year and a half. But now we're beyond that. In all cases, except for two, we still are not able to get into that Y12 History Center. The public is not, because of COVID, and we can't get easily to the graphite reactor. But we do have two new museums. The American Museum of Science and Energy has relocated from its location on Tulane Avenue over to Main Street, Oak Ridge. Now, when they relocated it, it had to get smaller. So the Oak Ridge city history portion didn't get conveyed over as well as it had been in the Tulane Avenue area. But it focuses on the science, and there's some in it about the Manhattan Project. But the Oak Ridge Heritage and Preservation Association has taken that Oak Ridge city history, placed a museum inside of the Midtown Community Center. And that the Oak Ridge History Museum is really going well. And it has taken up that void that was left when they transferred the exhibits and actually created new exhibits in the new location for the American Museum of Science and Energy.
Well, I'll look forward to visiting that next time I'm up that way.
The K25 History Center opened the last week in February in 2020 and closed the middle of March. And then it stayed closed until sometime earlier this year, around May or June, we opened it up. Now that museum has a tremendous amount of exhibits about gaseous diffusion. So the museums in Oak Ridge are coming back after COVID, and there are some new museums that were not here prior to the COVID situation. And people are coming. So when you get ready, you let me know, and I'll give you a tour.
I can get another tour, another Ray Smith tour. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, there's no tour like a Ray Smith tour.
And the original Museum of American Museum of Science and Energy was at, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, it was in an old cafeteria in Jefferson.
It was, and it was called the American Museum of Atomic Energy. Back then.
Yeah.
It actually opened the same day that they opened the city, March the 19th, 1949. So we're coming up on a significant anniversary for that museum here in just a year or so. We'll be talking about 75 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
That's the one I remember going to as a student, as a kid, and getting my radioactive dime, the little radioactive dime. So
I hope you didn't swallow it, Keith.
I probably did. I don't know.
Those are collector's items, and you can buy them on eBay now.
Oh yeah, sure.
What does a radioactive dime go for on eBay, Ray?
Anything from just a few dollars up to a few $100s. It's amazing what the range is of Manhattan Project artifacts that are on eBay. Some of them, people realize what they've gotten, others they don't. So I bought a few of the dollar ones. I don't spend much on it, but they're out there.
And I guess, John, you're probably like this too. You never know what you're going to find on Amazon or eBay, people selling. And I was like, one day I found a copy of my first Secret City documentary, Secret City, the Oak Ridge Story, signed. It was signed by me. At least it supposedly was signed by me. And it was like $90. And I was like, what the heck? If they're actually selling those for $90, I got a closet full of them,
Right.
And a pen,
You just gotta
dribble
them. You got to dribble them out a few at a time, though, Keith, so that people,
Exactly.
continue to perceive them as scarce.
Yeah.
I think I saw a signed first edition of Death's Acre, the first book that Dr. Bass and I did together. I think I saw that for a couple $100 once. Because those are kind of rare too. I actually have a copy of Death's Acre that was bound into the book upside down. I suspect that's the only one of its kind in the world. You know, the cover, the spine, if you hold the spine upright and then open it, the pages are all glued in upside down.
Wow.
It's kind of disorienting, but kind of fun. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, tell me if we're running out of time,
No,
Keith.
Oh, you're good.
I mentioned a few minutes ago that there are a lot of characters, and we talked about one, Arpad Vass, who's a real life character who got a cameo in the book. One character who's in the book also is my maternal grandmother. When I was starting out as a writer and as a documentary maker, my grandmother Nanny used to say to me, "Well, now I want you to tell my life story." And so I would ask her things. I knew that she'd had a really hard childhood, and she went through 4 husbands and at least one love affair that during a marriage. I knew she'd had some really hard times, and so I would start asking her things, and she would clam up and say, "I don't want to talk about it. It's too hard." Uh, I would say, "Well, it's going to be hard for me to tell your life story if you won't share it with me." But and occasionally she'd let down her guard just a little bit and let slip out some things. But when I was writing this Oak Ridge book, here's our merch moment. I'm gonna hold up the
there
book.
you go.
I love that cover with the X-ray of the hand on it.
Yeah.
But I thought, one way I can tell my grandmother's story is to make her a character in the book and incorporate some of the her backstory that I do know, into this character in the book. And this character in the book is an old woman named Beatrice. And anybody who's read, and probably not a lot of people, but those who've read or heard about Dante's Inferno will recognize that name. In the Inferno, Beatrice is Dante's guide to the underworld. So I thought it was kind of fun to use that name, because we're, the way the book is structured is, we have these flashbacks, in which the character Beatrice, is talking to our hero, Dr. Bill Brockton, about things from the World War II days of Oak Ridge. So she takes him back into that underworld of Oak Ridge history. But there's also in Beatrice, there's a little bit of the character of Scheherazade in the 1001 Nights, because she'll tell Dr. Brockton a little story, but then she'll leave it hanging at the end. So he has to come back for more, just like the character Scheherazade had to keep the Sultan, the king, hanging at the end of every story so he wouldn't chop off her head in the morning. So Beatrice in the book is this combination of Dante, classical literature, Arabian Nights, and my grandmother. And a lot of the backstory of this character Beatrice in the book is my grandmother's backstory. She was abandoned by her mother in Chattanooga, left with an aunt when she was about 13, and she had to make her way in the world early on, and some of the ways she made her way were pretty tough. But that was my tribute. So I've killed myself off, and I feature and then kill off my grandmother, and yeah. Anyway, but it was fun to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the book launch night.
Oh,
let's
I'm
talk
sorry.
A little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
more. And let's talk a little bit more about that experience, and tell us about the picture of the young girl that you literally fell in love with. You just really liked that picture.
I love that picture. So one of the things I always loved about Oak Ridge was the historic photographs, the photographs taken during World War II by a great photographer, Ed Westcott. Documenting the Manhattan Project. He got to go everywhere in Oak Ridge in these top secret plants during World War II, take pictures of things that the Germans or the Russians would have been delighted to have pictures of. But one of the pictures I found, so I have to give you a little backstory. So at the Y-12 plant where you worked for many years, Ray, the way they enriched uranium was in these giant electromagnets called calutrons, which basically use the very slight difference, in the magnetic fields or responsiveness of uranium-235 and uranium-238 to separate their paths as they came through these magnets and smashed onto these collectors. So these enormous machines called calutrons were operated mostly by young women, local East Tennessee young women, often usually just high school graduates. But I found this picture, and I'm going to share my screen if I can succeed, of a young woman sitting at the controls of a calutron. And as I was looking at this picture and talking to my book editor about what photographs would be good section dividers in the book, I called up this photograph, but some glitch in my computer made it appear as a negative rather than as a regular photograph. And I was so struck. Am I sharing that yet?
No.
Not yet.
There we go. How about that?
There we go.
Now it's up.
Go ahead.
It's up.
Okay. So I was so struck when I saw the negative version of it, and it made me, it looked more high tech. It looked kind of sci-fi, but absolutely beautiful young woman sitting at the controls of this complicated machine that it took the world's smartest physicists to design. But I love the halo effect of her hair. She's got dark hair in real life and light skin, but her hair is just glowing, which makes her look almost radioactive. And then there's a shadow cast by her arm on the panel of the calutron machine, that also looks like it's glowing. But at the book launch, I'm finally getting there, Ray. At the book launch, the night we had this book launch at the History Center there in Oak Ridge, I brought to auction off to raise money for helping preserve Oak Ridge history. I brought a giant framed enlargement of this photograph, about yay big. And the photographer who took the photograph, Ed Westcott, was there. And it turns out, Ray, did you identify who this was? Was that your detective work?
Yeah, let me help you there.
Okay.
Susan Welch knew who this person was. And she contacted me and said, Ray, I know who that person is in that picture you're talking about.
And I always call the picture, Calutron Girl. So Susan told you she knew who Calutron Girl was.
Right. And there's a good story about how that term Calutron Girls came to be too. That relates to Gladys Owens, the one who's in the famous picture Ed Westcott made of all of those Calutron girls. But that's not what we're talking about now. Susan came to me and said, Lucille Whitman is who that girl is. And Ray, she never worked at Y12. She was a Kodak model. And I said, oh, this is just going to be great. We're going to bring her out on the book launch and introduce her to John because he loves that picture. And he won't have any idea that it wasn't really a Calutron girl. I mean, Tennessee Eastman operated Y12. So when they wanted to make some photographs, the natural thing is they wanted to use one of their models, and they did. Right. So what we did is we took that opportunity to bring her out and introduce her to you. And then somewhere near the end of the conversation, I said to her, now you tell John what you did. And she told you, I never worked at the Calutrons. I was a model. We had a great fun that night.
She looks convincing.
Yes.
And we got, if I remember right, we got Lucille and Ed Westcott, the photographer, to sign that, and we auctioned that off. I wish I have a big enlargement of that picture hanging in my house. I wish I thought to get them to autograph my print as well, but it's a little late for that now, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a little late. Both of them are gone, but that's a great story, and you were a good subject for us to work on that night.
It was fun to learn the real story, the reveal. So what else should we talk about in
one other thing that I want you to talk about You also met one of Ed Westcott's sons, William Westcott. William, I believe, introduced you to the entrance point of the sewer system, and you took a walk. Tell us about that event.
Well, so I needed a way for our character, one of the characters, actually somebody who's done some murdering. I needed a way for her to go into hiding, to get away and go into hiding. And I had heard at some point, I guess from William, maybe in the research, that there was this big network of sewer tunnels, storm sewer, not sewage sewers,
Right.
underneath Oak Ridge. And that at some point, and that kids growing up in Oak Ridge in the 50s and 60s would go through these sewer tunnels and would play, and that there was a place that was like a room, where a lot of the pipes converged, sort of like under London or under Paris. There's this vast network of sewers and and chambers. So I thought, well, that would be interesting to include in the book. But I have this gonzo streak. I have to know a little bit about what I'm writing about. So I decided I would go into the sewers, and he had told me, and I also talked to the whoever the public works engineer for Oak Ridge is, and I got a map of the sewer system, and there was this opening up above what had been the heart of downtown Oak Ridge during World War II. There was an opening at one end of a soccer practice field up there on a hillside that wasn't covered over.
It's Blankenship Field. Yeah, Blankenship Field, I believe, up at Jackson Square.
Yeah. So, and there was no protective grate over it, which was sort of surprising. Just a big open pipe, and I think it was maybe 5 feet in diameter, 4 or 5 feet in diameter. And he told me that led down the hill, and if there was the room, it would be down there. So I put on a headlamp and some boots and a hard hat, and I duck walked my way down this sewer system. At one point, so there's a scene set at Big Ed's Pizza, famous pizzeria in Oak Ridge. At one point, not long after I started duck walking down the sewers, I saw a little rectangle of daylight overhead, and I looked up, and there were people, walking around in Jackson Square. I could hear them talking. I'm down there under their feet. And I thought, well, I hope these aren't the last human voices I hear, because I was at that point descending into the underworld, and I didn't have a Beatrice to guide me. I just had this headlamp, and not too long after that, I came to this pretty steep downgrade in the pipe. I mean, I was kind of slipping and sliding down, and I thought, oh my Lord, if I get to the other end and I can't get out, I'm in trouble, because I don't know if I could find my way back, and I don't know if I could get up this slope if I did. But I went down. I found some convergences. I never did find a big room, but then I finally came out down by the Department of Energy headquarters building by Oak Ridge Turnpike, the main artery through town. There was kind of a big set of this big opening there, by the sort of creek that runs alongside that down there. And then I also incorporated the sewers. There's a big sewer opening, or used to be, near the library, big culvert there. And so I had this character escape by jumping into the sewer network there at the library. But it was an interesting experience. When I came out and walked home back up the hill, I was covered with mud and spider webs, and I'd been hunkered over duck walking for about 2 hours, so I'm sure I looked like some creepy old I don't know what, somebody who'd gotten out of a freak show.
I hope you checked the weather forecast that day before you decided to to go.
It was a hot, sunny summer day.
That's good.
So it was, yeah, there was a lot of risk I might get trapped or lost, but there wasn't a lot of risk that I was going to get drowned in a
Yeah.
flash flood, at least that day.
Well, that's good.
I'm crazy, but I'm not totally stupid.
I understand. I understand.
Some
Well,
might debate that.
you need to know that every once in a while, the story or the question comes up, is there an underground city in Oak Ridge?
Mm.
And I always answer no, but there's a really large storm sewer drainage system that John Jefferson
No.
walked through. And that way I get to introduce your book to
I
them. So,
appreciate that, Ray. I need to give you a penny out of every 10 cents I get on that book.
I have had more fun talking about the book and my experience with you guys when you wrote the book. It is now woven into Oak Ridge history when I make presentations.
That's great. I absolutely loved researching and writing the book. And, and as I say,
So before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. And this is an Oak Ridge based program, and we've brought out some hidden history, Keith, today that I don't think people would have known about. But take this opportunity to tell us what you're doing now.
So I'm doing a couple of different things. I'm doing some screenwriting. I've got a couple of screenwriting projects that I'm tinkering with. I've sent off one screenplay, which is an adaptation of a Tennessee novel, not by me, but by somebody whose work I admire a lot. I've sent it off to a few competitions, and I was a semi-finalist in one and a quarter finalist in another, and so I'm encouraged by that, and I keep working on that. There's a subplot from one of the other Body Farm novels that I want to pull out and turn into a screenplay. And then right now, Dr. Bass and I are waiting to hear. There's a production company in Hollywood that has a series proposal. They want to serialize the Body Farm, make a network or streaming series based on the Body Farm. I mean, we don't know how that's going. It's all, everything's very hush hush. It's probably a higher level secrecy around that than there was around the atomic work of Oak Ridge National Laboratory in World War II. But if they succeed, it'll be exciting, and you guys will hear the whooping and hollering from us when we know.
Well, that's fantastic. That would be, in my opinion, it'd be fascinating. And there's so many things that are being done now. That would certainly be towards the higher end level of interesting things that would stream. Because I've watched a bunch of stuff recently that's not even close to that kind of story.
Yeah, it's been amazing to me, Keith, that there hasn't been either a feature film or a series about the Body Farm years ago. It continues to astonish me. I've tried pitching it a time or two, and I don't have the Hollywood or TV connections to make it happen.
Right.
We had a real close, hopeful encounter of the Hollywood kind back in, I think it was 2007. George Clooney's production company, it was very interested in it, and they had a development deal, it's called, with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers had basically given them a bunch of money and said, bring us 5 good ideas a year, I think was the number. And this was one of the 5 that they took to Warner Brothers back in 2007, I think. And Warner Brothers sent us an option contract. They wanted to option it. And literally, Dr. Bass and I were sitting in the corporate headquarters or the cafeteria at the corporate headquarters of Borders Books, where we had gone to do a book talk for the employees of Borders Books back when Borders Books was a big thing. We were sitting in the cafeteria looking over the language of the option contract, and we got a call from our book agent saying, forget it. The Hollywood writers have just walked out on strike, so the option is dead.
Oh, wow.
So, and when the strike ended, the Hollywood writers went back to work. I thought, all right, now it's going to revive. But for some reason, it was if they'd never heard of it. Whatever momentum it had was gone by the end of the strike. This just shows to go you how fickle things can be in the entertainment business.
John,
But, maybe this time's the time.
maybe. Well, we hope so. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that.
All righty.
John, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us this morning.
I enjoyed it.
Really
It's a
been
pleasure.
interesting.
Appreciate you all doing all this work to keep Oak Ridge history alive. I think that's powerfully important. It's great that you're doing this in the digital age when it's gonna remain out in the cyber universe forever.
That is true. That is true.
Thank you both.
Ray, who do we have coming up next time?
Well, I think we've got Cindy Kelly, who is the president of the Atomic Heritage Foundation. I believe she's going to be got her scheduled to talk to us. And then I've also reached out to Cameron Reed. Cameron is a professor, a retired professor. He's actually up in Nova Scotia now. We can reach, it's amazing what this technology allows. We can reach all across the world even, but he has written a book about the Manhattan Project and he's the one that actually has done the research about the amount of electricity that was used during the Manhattan Project at Oak Ridge. And we'll be able to bring that hidden history out when we talk to him. And of course, Cindy was involved with the development of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. And she has had done lots of oral history interviews, such as what you've done, Keith, as well. So we'll look forward to having those two folks on in the not too distant future. And John, we really appreciate you taking time today.
I enjoyed it, and it's great to see you guys. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has. And you get back to Oak Ridge and let me give you that tour.
I absolutely will. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Ray. And folks, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks.